Today we'll be drinking delicious coffee. And yeah, I'm in Maui. Just got here. Finally. So I heard there was a bad case of confirmation bias and fear over here with that fake missile launch. The one that was the false alarm. And so I thought to myself, I'd better get right over there, see if I can straighten things out. I think it's going to take me a week, but by the time I leave, I think Hawaii will be largely straightened out. So let's talk about some of the fun news of the day. You don't want to miss anything. So Senators Perdue and Cotton, and Tom Cotton, no friend of the president, at least historically, both of them have said that the president did not say the word that he was reported to have said. Let's do a little check with you. All things considered, who do you believe? Do you believe Dick Durbin, who said that the president said the word multiple times? Or do you believe two respected senators who say, I was in the room and it just didn't happen? Or do you look at Lindsey Graham's comment that he's not going to comment, and he made his comments directly to the president? Or do you believe the president, who said he didn't actually say that? Who do you believe? I just want to see from your comments, who do you believe? It's interesting because if it's true that Perdue and Cotton heard the word, do you think that they would both go public and say, with such a bold lie? Does that sound believable? Now, it's also possible that he said it, but it wasn't when they were paying attention, or I'm sure it was there are other possibilities. But it's kind of interesting because if Lindsey Graham, so here's my deciding factor. If Lindsey Graham had also said it didn't happen, and Perdue and Cotton also said it didn't happen, I would say it didn't happen. But what I think is probably the truth is that he used words in the neighborhood of the things that are being reported, but not in the tone or context that it was reported. So I think the president probably did get taken out of context somewhat, but probably said things close enough to that message that that Lindsey Graham doesn't feel comfortable just flat out refuting Dick Durbin. Now, of course, Lindsey Graham is a wise politician, and he knows not to start fights when you're trying to get a deal. So it's entirely possible that he also didn't hear it, but doesn't want to embarrass Dick Durbin when he's trying to get a deal. So it could be just a collegial thing where he's saying, look, I'm going to tell you privately that you're full of shit, and I'm going to tell the president privately what I think of what he did or did not say, but let's get a deal done. So given all that, my guess is that it was certainly taken out of context, and the people in the room. See, here's the thing that is making me a little bit crazy about this whole situation. And I've said this before, but I'm going to keep saying it until somebody agrees with me. When you say things privately, you often use shortcuts because the person you're talking to knows the context and knows what you're talking about. And you will say more outrageous things in a small group of people you know than you would if you were giving a speech. So what Dick Durbin did And honestly, I have no respect for the guy. Uh, I I feel real anger toward Dick Durbin for what he did. All right, his role is terrible. Because imagine, well, let me give you a real example. I was just at the Avis Rent-A-Car, and there was an African American woman on her phone, and she was talking to sound like a friend or a family member, and she was standing right next to me, so I couldn't not hear it because she was on the phone right next to me, and here's what she said. She was very mad because she felt that there had been some racist thing that happened to her or her son recently. I don't know what the circumstances were, but she said, "In Donald Trump's America, even Hawaii is worse than the South. I've been in the South and it's worse here. It's Donald Trump's America." Now, when you've got a problem that big that you can't even be an African American living in the country and feel comfortable, that's a really, really, really big problem. And what did Dick Durbin do with something that was already a big concern? He took it from a comment that would have happened in a room that I believe everybody in the room knew the context, that he was talking about the country, not the individuals, right? In fact, you probably heard the story that Rand Paul he just told the press that when Trump was a private citizen, Trump helped to fund Rand Paul to go to Haiti to give free eye operations on Haitians who needed it. That doesn't sound like someone who hates the people of Haiti. Doesn't sound like it. And notice that the president didn't bring that up himself. He never mentioned it, which makes it more credible, actually. So Dick Durbin took this small thing, which in the context of that meeting, senators swear to make points. They all know the context, that he's talking about countries, not individuals. And by taking the private conversation and simply quoting it, I think he probably tried to quote it as close to possible. It made it from a bad thing in a room, but a bad thing that didn't really have much impact on anything. It turned it into really a gigantic international problem. It wounded our standing in the world. It made the woman who was standing next to me at the Avis, it made her uncomfortable in her own damn country. How would you like to be uncomfortable in your own country? I'm sure lots of people feel that, but just imagine that. Imagine that you feel that the president has somehow given permission for people to be as bad as they might have secretly wanted to be. Yeah, so I would say, I've of course condemned the S word that was used, because when I heard it, it was out of context, meaning that it was told to the public. So that when I heard the word shithole, the first time I heard it, at least in terms of this story, I heard it in public. In public, there is no place for words like that, because they will be interpreted the way they were. In private, and it was deeply offensive to people. Now, so if one person had said that to me privately, I probably would have just laughed at the word, but I also would have known they're talking about the country having, a bad economy and not producing a lot of, scholars because their education system isn't up to the task. So I think Dick Durbin is the villain here. And I know that how this is going to be interpreted by the idiots who come on here just to take things out of context. So let me say as clearly as possible that if the president said that, even in a private, semi-private setting, it was a mistake. And it was certainly deeply offensive to the people who later heard it. But the bigger mistake, by far, in terms of damage, was what Dick Durbin did, presuming he's the leak, or at least he's confirmed the statement. That, I don't know, that seems unforgivable. I mean, think of the damage that that guy just did to the country. Now, I know he's going to say, and some of you might say as well, yes, but the president said these things and the world must be informed. No, he said them in a different context. If you take it out of context and you don't understand that the way people talk privately to people they know, and who everybody understands the real context, as soon as you take it out of context and make it a public statement, people are not sophisticated enough to mentally adjust that back to, okay, that probably sounded differently, one-on-one. People aren't that clever, right? So they just say, my God. Essentially people are judging this as if Trump had said it publicly. Would you agree with that? Would you agree with the statement that people are assessing the statement as if Trump had said it for public consumption, which obviously didn't happen? All right. Who would ever want to be in a meeting with him again? Yeah, if you had a chance to work with Dick Durbin, would you do it? I wouldn't. Not a chance. I also heard somebody tell me yesterday that having money was racist by definition. Have you ever heard that? Somebody, I won't name names, but somebody I know really well who is in the African American community, I'm trying to be as polite as possible because of the context here, said that having money was racist. And that the only way to fix that would be for the people who had the money, white people specifically, to just give the money to black people. And that actually was her solution to racism, is for rich white people to give their money to black people. Now, so I don't know how you solve that problem, but I would desperately like to find something that the black community wants that is specific and actionable, and something that a Republican administration could embrace. So when you talk about stuff like, let's say, apprenticeships, right? Republicans love apprenticeships. It's good for the black community. They like it too. Let's talk about that, right? Yeah. What the hell isn't racist? Well, let me ask you this question. How would you judge somebody that you believed you had seen the signs that they're a racist, but when you ask them, they say, no, I'm not, I'm the opposite of that. And then when you look at their actions don't seem to, their actions can also be explained by, just doing their job or whatever. Was I in Oakland? What's that got to do with anything? So are we in strange territory now, where does it seem to you that we're judging people by their inner thoughts? Because it used to be that being a racist meant you did some physical thing in the real world that was racist. If all you're doing is changing the formula for who gets into the country, and most of the people coming in are not going to be Americans by definition, well, all of them are not going to be by definition, isn't every decision you make about immigration racist? Well, let me put it this way. Would it be possible to make any change to immigration policy that would not be racist in outcome? Let me ask you that question, because it might be. But give me an example, if you can. Can you think of any way that immigration policy could be changed, and I mean any kind of change that changes who gets in, that would not be racist? Because I can't think of any. Yeah, because whatever your immigration policy is, it's going to, even if you don't want it to, it's going to favor some countries over others, right? And if it, and any immigration policy that favors one country over another has to be racist by outcome, even if it's not your intention. So can we blame people for being racists if 100% of the options have a racial outcome? If they don't have any choice, it's like any change you make is going to make somebody unhappy, and there's no doubt about that. Yeah, so it does seem to be President Trump is dealing with essentially a thought crime. If you ask people to give you examples of what he's done that's racist, and maybe you've done this, maybe you've had this conversation, but we have this thing called the Supreme Court and this thing called the Constitution. So if the president crosses any line that the Supreme Court or even the lower court thinks is racist, they would stop it immediately, right? Not only would they stop it if it was racist, but we've seen that the courts are willing to stop something on a thought crime. So I believe that you need to fact check me on this, but I thought I saw a headline that said some court has blocked any change to DACA. In other words, letting the people stay is what the court wanted. And the reasoning was that past statements and acts by the president made it seem demonstrably like a racist act, even though some other president could have done the same action if he had not used the same rhetoric. And the court would have said, that's okay. So we don't mind the outcome. We only mind what you were thinking when you did it. Now think about that. This is a court. A court actually ruled that someone's inner thoughts mattered, even though the outcome didn't. Because if somebody else had come up with that outcome, it would have been okay, because that person did not have the reputational problem. So is that a good system? Now, some have said to me that a merit-based system is racist by definition, because even if you imagine that all the races are exactly equal, I'm not going to get into that kind of a debate. I find that offensive. But since the education systems are different, and there would certainly be a pattern to that you would end up with a racist outcome, even if you weren't planning to do that. Even if it wasn't in your head, that's just how it would turn out. Yeah, there's a lot of mind reading going here. All right, let me make an offer to you. And I'm only going to do this if there's a really strong interest. I believe most of you have seen my impression of an anti-Trumper. It involves a little white mustache or a little white goatee. And I'm thinking that for this discussion about whether we've accidentally elected a president who's a racist, or intentionally, I guess some people would say, shouldn't we have something like the Scopes monkey trial? That was the famous trial in which evolution was put on trial. It was actually a science teacher who was teaching it back in the days when it wasn't legal to do that. Would you be interested in me doing a Periscope in which I put on trial the question of whether President Trump is a racist, and I played both sides. So I would give the best argument from both sides and then let you decide. Would you want to watch that? Define racist. Yeah, that's a problem. I don't know if racism is one of those things that everybody thinks they know it when they see it, but if two people don't agree, who gets the win? Can we please stop talking about everything in terms of racism? Well, I'd like to. You probably heard Morgan Freeman years ago. He did an interview with Mike Wallace. And Mike Wallace said, what can we do about racism in this country? And bear in mind, this was, 20 years ago. And Morgan Freeman's answer was, stop talking about it. And, the follow-up question was, that's it? Just stop talking about it? He goes, yeah, just stop talking about it. Which is further confirmation bias and evidence that, Morgan Freeman sometimes plays, as an actor, he plays the role of God. And when he plays that role, you think, that's pretty convincing. He actually does look like God. He totally nails God, which has got to be hard for an actor. But when you hear him say stuff like that, it makes you think, maybe he is God, because I'm pretty sure that would work. It's never going to happen, but it's a provocative thought. So I didn't see a lot of interest in the trial idea, but I might do it anyway. All right, what else is going on? It seems to me that the Michael Wolfe book backfired because it was so over the line that it just sort of embarrassed people on that side. So you notice how quickly they retreated to the racist charge, because that was always the one that worked the best. During the election, that was certainly the one that got the most purchase. And the president just obliterated the idea that he was incompetent by holding that public meeting on camera, where some people say he wasn't that great, but enough people watched it who have been in meetings to know that looked like a pretty good meeting. Yeah, I'm kind of sick of the whole racism conversation. I'll probably get assassinated over writing about Trump. I think my days are numbered. Is Trump playing 4D chess? Well, it depends on the topic. Could your girlfriend wear a sexy bailiff costume? Well, I'll ask her. That would be a better show, wouldn't it? The weather's perfect. You want to see the weather? Well, you can't see it too well. Well, there it is. I'll give you a little bit. All right, this is my first real vacation since I started writing Win Bigly. So this is sort of my reward vacation. Yeah, it's still sunny in Hawaii. It's a beautiful day here. Durban lied just before MLK Day. Yeah. So I got a question for you. Does immigration control hurt or help rich people and hurt or help Black Americans? Because it seems to me that the rich people are the ones who want more immigration. Well, let me put it in personal terms. As you know, I often write about the president and persuasion, and so people assume that I agree with his policies all the time. And if I do, it's on the margins. I'm more in a different direction than his direction on a lot of stuff. But he might have the right answer. How would I know? And immigration is one of them. Because I try to put this in terms of my personal experience. And I think, personally, I like immigration. Because where I am, there's not much crime. I'm far enough from the border that, by the time people get here, they just want to work. And so immigration just keeps my costs down. So the price at the restaurant is lower because there's immigration. If I want to hire somebody, I can get them cheaper because of immigration. So as a rich guy, and especially where I live, immigration is all positive, just for me personally. But I'm not deaf to the fact that it's very bad for other people. So I don't understand why the black community is working so hard to make me richer. I'm not sure, because every time somebody calls the president a racist because of his immigration policy, it makes it harder for him to restrict immigration. And I'll remind you that the context of this conversation is I don't have a strong opinion on immigration because my personal interest would be I like immigrants and they keep my costs down and it's just all good for me. So if you're asking me what I like personally, immigration's great for me. It helps me stay rich. I get a lot of stuff done. They tend to be great people, good character. In my neighborhood, your neighborhood might be different, but if I were black and I saw people coming in and keeping my wages low just by supply and demand, I don't know. I wouldn't be too happy about it. Aziz Ansar was accused of sexual. See any way around that? There may be a timing difference. Most of it will probably be true. A lot of it won't. Yeah, the other thing that people say about building the wall and border immigration in general, there are some opinions that you just say, well, I have a different opinion. And then there are some opinions that you just have to say are stupid, okay? And I don't often say that, because I think if you rely on, well, you're just being stupid, you've abandoned reason and you're just ad hominem. But let me give you an example where stupid kind of covers it in this case. And it's rare, and I don't like to say that word. But here's the thing. Anytime you add friction to a process, people do less of it. So, for example, if you have a restaurant that doesn't have good parking, you will get fewer people coming, even if you knew that they could all get parking. But in their minds, they thought, it's kind of hard to park. It might take me a few minutes. So if you add friction to anything, people change their behavior. And it doesn't even take much friction. So when people say, there's no point in building the Trump wall because people will just throw a rope over it and climb over and stuff, I say to you, the wall is not about stopping immigration. It's about adding friction to it. All right? If you add enough friction, you can slow it down to a level that, is whatever the country thinks it needs. So the fact that some people can get over the wall, or even, let's say, 2/3 of people can get over a wall, that's 1/3 of the people who aren't going to try. So the wall is not about stopping dead every drug, every person who gets over. It's about adding friction to something where we want friction. Now, one of the arguments I hear, so let me summarize. So if you're saying that wall won't stop people because people will just climb over it, they'll just throw a rope over and climb over it, the answer is yes, they will. But fewer people will try to get over anything that's just a little extra hard. It's just the way we are. a little bit of friction changes people's behavior a lot. Now, I've been hearing people say that the Israel's wall is not the success they claim because it has some hundreds or thousands of tunnels under it. But when was the last time there was a big terrorist attack in Israel? I shouldn't ask that because there was probably one today while I was flying, but it seems to have worked anyway, because what the wall did was added friction, and it seems to me that Israel might be watching those tunnels anyway, and there may be more to it than we know. But whenever there's friction, you're moving things in the right direction. Israel is building an underground wall. Yeah, they should. It seems to me that you could put sonic sensors along the wall and you could tell if anybody was building a tunnel while it was happening. No, we did not do a simultaneous sip, and I think it's time. Grab your beverage. It's time for simultaneous sip. So, how many of you remember me saying that when the our Cuban embassy seemed to be under attack with some kind of sonic attack, there was some kind of sonic weapon, and it was reported basically everywhere as it was just true. All right? Do you remember me saying it's not true, and that what you're seeing instead is the most classic mass hysteria that you're likely to ever see? It was a clean, unambiguous mass hysteria. And do you remember when I said, no, every single person reporting on this is wrong, and I'm the only one in the world who's right? Literally, I was the only one. I'll bet you can't come up with one other person in the whole world who said 100% of the reporting is wrong, and it is a mass hysteria. And what have we learned since? We learned that there is apparently no weapon that is, aimed at people. So it was a mass hysteria. So when I say that having a training in hypnosis and persuasion and things like that allows you to predict the future, you watch me do it right in front of you, right? I mean, you do see it happening in real time. You saw me predict the president, predict that he'd have a good end of year. This latest blow up with the shithole thing, nobody could predict that because that just came out of nowhere. But and yet you still believe 97% of scientists? No. Now here, let me clarify. I agree that the experts in climate science are mostly on the same side. Whether that's 90 or 97%, they're overwhelmingly on the same side on the science. Okay? But I would suggest that measuring things, and engineering your thermostat and your measuring devices, it's not exactly science. And then when you build models that predict, that part's not really science either. It's something scientists do, and it could be right or wrong, could be good or bad, but it's not science. And then when you take the scientific projections and go to the next step, which you have to do, then it's an economic prediction. So the economic prediction is, doom and gloom based on the models, which are not exactly science, which is based on the science, which is probably pretty solid, meaning that we probably do know that if you add certain gases to the atmosphere, you get a certain result. So let me give you my climate science prediction. Certainly, it was true that the Paris Accord was a useless agreement. All right, so if you call that a hoax, that's probably too strong a word, but it's not that far off if you talk about the agreement itself. Now, if you were to say to me, we must do something because of all the economic calamity coming, I would suggest to you that you have some competing models. So the climate science model says the water is going to rise and destroy everything on the coast. But there are other models that say exactly the opposite. And those other models are the banks and the finance people, the people who make loans and mortgages to things that are on the coast. None of that's priced in. So you've got two competing sets of experts. The financial experts, who have been doing this sort of stuff for a long time, haven't priced it in. So if it turned out that climate change does disrupt a bunch of things, maybe air storms are bigger or whatever, I've got a feeling we're just going to adapt. We may not know, it just might not bother us. I think it's far more likely to be like the year 2000 bug that turned out to be a big nothing than it is likely to be the end of the world. But one can never know. All right. The '08 crash wasn't priced in. Well, the '08 crash also had to do with derivatives and a bubble. I would say that enough people were calling the bubble ahead of time. I think Warren Buffett was. So there were enough experts sounding the alarm that was a little bit of a different case.